While every other city in Canada is watching its real estate market stall and condos fall off a cliff and recessionary fears rise by the day, I'm going to tell you why I think Calgary is about to move in the exact opposite direction. And this isn't just a short term, obvious little boost because of what's happening with energy prices and the global energy market. It is a longer term view, and it is a conversation that I don't think anyone is having that is absolutely necessary for those of us outside of the oil and gas industry. My name is Kelly Doody, and I am not an energy expert or a economist or a financial guru, but I am a journalist, marketer, communicator, and real estate professional. And I have lived in Calgary my whole life. I'm a fourth generation Calgarian, and I have lived through every boom and bust of the oil and gas industry since the 80s. But I've made a career out of listening and watching and deciphering and then leveraging evolving consumer trends and sentiments and behaviors, and then launching products or companies or marketing campaigns to fill the void and meet the demand or the moment where it is. And this particular moment is a little heavier than other moments because it involves this massive Middle East conflict that we're seeing, but it also comes back to Calgary, the city that I love and the people that I love, and again, a conversation that needs to be had. So, what is it that we're talking about, and how does this relate to Calgary and its real estate market and the economics as a whole of this city and its people? Well, 10 profound signals that I want to go through and why they matter. So, number one, obviously, this Middle East conflict, the attack on Iran now 4 weeks ago, the retaliation of Iran on its Gulf neighbors, so Arab Emirates and Qatar and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Yemen, all of them, they are all now in this massive state of conflict. And the damage that has been sustained, particularly on the energy infrastructure of these nations, which, remember, oil and gas is their lifeblood and livelihood in 2025, is enormous. And by some experts' analyses, they're saying that it could be 5 to 7 years before some of these, for example, LNG terminals are brought back online, or these processing plants or oil and gas fields are brought back to life. Not to mention that Strait of Hormuz, even if military and campaigns ended tomorrow, that is not necessarily going to open back up, and we're not going to see shipping lanes suddenly like manifest and oil delivered to markets as they should be. This is going to take some time. And by all assessments, even if conflicts stop tomorrow, we're looking at an entire year, another at least 40, 50 weeks, which is all of 2026, of, again, repair and firing back up and, returning to normalcy. So not likely, and an entire year here of crisis in energy and supply and global markets. Number two, the global energy disruption and the impact it's had on these Southeast Asian economies. So I'm talking the largest customers of these Gulf Arab oil and gas producing nations being India, China, Pakistan, and all of the Southeast Asian, Thailand, Malaysia, etc. They are real. These countries and companies have been brought to their knees without having their ongoing fuel deliveries and fuel supply. And I think this has been really eye-opening for a lot of us. Yes, we understand that oil and gas still powers the majority of industry and, modern society, but I don't think it's been so acutely obvious to us as it has over the last couple of weeks, and last week in particular, when we saw these, the fuel shortages and the chaos that is causing in some of these countries, and not just on businesses and households, but lives and livelihoods for sure. Number three, Asia and Europe are now looking to Canada more than ever. And is that surprising? Absolutely not. These countries want a reliable, safe, conflict-free source of their fuel, again, oil and gas, more than ever. And they've been asking for it for some time. Think about Europe asking for Canada's natural gas back when Russia invaded Ukraine several years ago. And were we able to meet that moment? No, we weren't, but more on that in a minute. For now, what we've also seen is that forecasts and projections have absolutely changed in terms of how much Canadian energy regulators and oil producers, the companies that actually drill and explore and develop this resource, understanding the world to want our product. So the Canadian Energy Regulator has recently changed forecasts, looking at demand to know that in fact the volume and the time frame in which we will be selling these products to markets is a lot longer and larger than we thought. That's just fact and real and trends that are not all that surprising, given that the energy transition is underway, but taking longer and more than we thought. And beyond that, these evolving and growing countries, especially with AI and everything else, are needing more power and more fuel than maybe a lot of us anticipated, and particularly when we were looking at things during COVID or shortly after, where productivity was down and so was manufacturing and fossil fuel usage. That has shot completely in the other direction. Number 4, the war has shown Canadians that the world does indeed run on oil and gas, and they're going to get it from whoever is willing to give it to them. And this is interesting because the industry has been saying this for a long time. Ask anyone in Alberta, ask anyone downtown Calgary that's been in the PR or the marketing department as to like what they've been trying to tell Canadians, not only to increase their energy literacy, but shift the dialogue a little bit so that they're not so vilified, and that in fact Canadians understand that when our resource is brought to market, because of revenue sharing and royalty payments and equalization and the Canadian Constitution, the country benefits. But guess what? Nobody was listening. Nobody really understood or cared. It was hard to empathize with Big Bad Alberta and the wealth and the industry that's been so secretive and so closed off that even Calgarian, those of us outside of the industry, couldn't really empathize or believe it or trust it. It was like, sure, yeah. Clean burning and lower carbon footprint. Yeah, sure. And beyond that, when we were told that, you know, these other countries that needed the product were going to just import it from China or Russia or Saudi Arabia if we didn't give it to them, I still think we thought it kind of fell on deaf ears because we thought, well, it's ending soon anyway, and we're not going to go build all that infrastructure for a dying industry, et cetera, et cetera. So interestingly, that has also started to shift. This is item number 6. Over the last 18 months, when Donald Trump and our Canadian sovereignty and our economic security and military security and all the rest of it started to become a real concern for Canadians collectively. And this new threat that we started to face in November 2024 when Trump was elected and started calling Trudeau the governor and making threats about Canada's 51st statehood, our priorities also shifted. So where in very recent times, Canada and Canadians have stated that climate change and, equality and, just general social issues have been top priorities, top policy and political issues for us, those have fallen behind economic security, sovereignty, reliability on ourselves, and essentially like everything to do with our GDP and our productivity and our expanding into new markets and diversifying our economy, etc. Those have all become more important. Economics, job security, affordability, these are all now dinner table conversations, and I would dare say regular parts of the Canadian understanding, unlike they ever have been before, and unlike any PR campaign has ever been able to impress upon them. We had to see it and feel it in real life, and thanks to Donald Trump, that's now something that is, I think, very well understood. Layer in this Gulf War, and holy smokes, there's just this added layer of understanding that, in fact, oil and gas still matters, and Canada has a lot of it. So what are we going to do about that? This brings me to point number 7. Canada has the 3rd largest proven oil reserves on the planet. And around us are the Venezuelas and Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq and Kuwait and some of these nations that don't have the best track record on human rights, environmental, and just straight up security and reliability, which is what those European and Asian countries want. They want conflict-free energy supply that they can rely on and that they know is moving in the right direction when it comes to decarbonization or a cleaner burning and cleaner processed or developed fuel source. So where does that leave Canada? Well, I'm going to say that number 8 point worth mentioning is that we did not meet the moment when asked several years ago by Europe, and prior to that by other nations in general. Trudeau's response to the German chancellor, it just several years ago was incredibly frustrating for Albertans in particular when he made the case that we do not have a business case to ship LNG to Germany. And I think this is very much a part of why Albertans are so frustrated at Ottawa and at potentially the rest of their country mates for not necessarily understanding why this resource is so important to get to market. And those of us that are in the industry acutely understand of it. Those of us on the outside, like myself, again, didn't have a whole lot of empathy or understanding for it, despite the fact that we have absolutely benefited from it. I will say that wholeheartedly. In 2007, 2008, as a Calgarian, I mean, I've friends that refer to it as rich Calgary. The expense accounts, the spending, the fundraisers, the infrastructure development, the schools, hospitals, roads, all of the things that benefited from Alberta's booming oil and gas industry were very real. Did we talk about it? Did we admit it? No, not really. And maybe we didn't even necessarily connect all the dots. It just felt good and you don't question things. But then in 2020 and 2021, remember, that industry fell off a cliff. And it was COVID days when the oil and gas producers had to literally pay people to take product off their hands. So just imagine that for a moment. You're selling $100 t-shirts and you're paying people $10 a piece just to buy them off of you. And then the very next year or two, things turn around and you have record profits again. Like, this roller coaster is so real, and that's a whole other discussion. That, are we handling it right? Absolutely not. But the reality is that last time there was a boom, so 2022, 3, 4, guess what happened? Well, oil and gas companies did not invest back into the economies or into the province with infrastructure and development and new, drilling, etc., like they had in years prior. Why? Because there was so much uncertainty. There was zero signals from the feds or from even, Canadians as a whole that they were going to let them get their increased product to market. There was no ability to build a pipeline or expand on an existing one or build a terminal or a processing facility. It was just so difficult to get things approved or done because, again, Canadians didn't understand or care, and our priorities were slightly different or drastically different. And as an Albertan witnessing it all, it's fascinating, and it's very layered, but there's multiple reasons why the industry has its backup, and a lot of Albertans do too, which is a whole other discussion. So did we meet the moment at that time? No. But can we now? Yes. Listen to Carney. Listen to, again, Canadians who understand that things have got to change for all of the reasons I've already mentioned. Number 9, important to note, is that the USA's response, both for, Europe's call for LNG in recent years and just the general world's oil needs and increasing demand, is that they massively ramped up production. And they built LNG terminals all along their east and southern coasts. And aside from one LNG terminal that they had in Alaska, I think it came online in 1969, they didn't ramp this up and turn the lights on until 2016 on their first LNG export terminal in Louisiana, so right at that Haynesville Shale Basin, and exporting LNG from the Permian and other southern states to Asia or Europe or wherever it was going. And since then, they have brought online a ton of other plants, and they went from zero to being the #1 producer or exporter and producer of LNG in the world. So yes, they met the moment, and they have majorly benefited from it. Now, does Canada have bigger reserves in our Montney Basin, that whole west side of our province that heads into northeast BC around Grand Prairie and up through the Peace River? Yes, this is an opportunity for us, and you can bet that oil and gas producers are making a move on that. There has been less spending in the few years before this, that to me, as an outsider, I can't help but think, like, there's no way that you guys aren't going to increase production, and maybe you're not going to hire, thousands of people in Calgary or into downtown office towers because you've gotten more efficient, and you, like everybody, you're more automated, or you're AI driven, or you just got really good at being more lean when you had to be in 2020, 2021. So maybe those jobs won't come flying back. But at the same time, When I look to what happened in Kitimat with LNG Canada and that enormous $40 billion investment and the tens of thousands of jobs created, and now all of this other infrastructure that is going to have to support an increased industry. So if we're going to increase production and capacity, there will be jobs, but there will also be revenues, and that trickle down into the economy that we all benefit from as Albertans and Canadians, but mostly, let's be real, Albertans and Calgarians. This is where we feel it first and most profoundly. So what am I trying to say? Well, again, in the last oil and gas boom, 2022, 2024, producers didn't necessarily invest their profits, which is different from like 07, 08 or 14, 15. And the jobs and infrastructure development and inbound migration, it wasn't necessarily for, well, it wasn't as profound. There was a lot of inbound migration, however, in 22 to 2024, but potentially for different reasons. We just had a booming economy related to oil and gas. Yes. So there was a lift there. And with it, real estate. Now, this is an industry and this is a product that is so sentiment driven. And I really want to hit that home. When we're talking about pricing of groceries or commodities and consumables, gas prices, this is almost out of our hands. This is supply chain and world markets and greater corporately driven decisions that we don't, again, have much of a say or impact on. We just kind of bite the bullet and pay more for groceries. But when it comes to real estate, it is so sentiment driven. It is not even comparable. We don't, as Canadians and Calgarians, we don't make long-term necessarily real estate purchasing decisions. Sure, we buy homes and we sit on them, and that's Canada's biggest source of wealth, or Canadians. Yes, I get that. But in the short term, we get caught up in the FOMO, and this can be seasonal. It can be quarterly. Things can shift on a dime where suddenly everybody's buying and I better get off the sidelines and buy. It happens fast. And regret can creep in 2 years later or not. And we saw this in 2022, 4. 2024 was like enormous increases in home prices and values. Has it fallen off entirely? No, it's got flat in 2025, but is this still an incredible place to invest? Yes, because it is still more affordable compared to the big cities of Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal in some ways. And we haven't seen things fall off a cliff because our real estate market operates independently of what other factors affecting Toronto, Vancouver, other Canadian cities face. Case in point, I was trying to sell my house in Calgary in 2021, and it was impossible. It was so frustrating because the rest of the country was popping off. Toronto, BC, Ontario, everything. Everybody, remember, made those decisions like, oh, it's COVID, I work from home. I'm going to sell my house in the city and move to this quaint little Ontario town, and that's forever, so no big deal. And oh, I'm going to overpay for it because everybody else is. Fast forward to now, and guess what? They're heading back to the city or watching prices fall. Yes. But my point is that Calgary did not see that. When the rest of the country, Maritimes, Halifax included, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, they were seeing rises, we were flat. And why? Well, I firmly believe, and historical data will say, it corresponds to the oil and gas industry. And there wasn't much happening here at that time. In fact, it was really flat, as I've said. They were paying people to take the product of the biggest industry that drives our city and our province. So what's going to happen in the years ahead? I'm not saying that suddenly, by November of this year, Fort McMurray real estate is going to do what it did in the insanity of 2007, or Grand Prairie is going to be, the new New York. But I am saying that we are going to see different factors and different supply, demand, pricing, inputs and impacts than the rest of our country will. And if you're paying attention and you're waiting for a signal to come from the oil and gas industry as to what they're going to do next and where they're going to invest, you're not going to get it. We are outsiders. And again, that's a tight-lipped industry that has operated that way for an eternity for good reasons and some annoying ones too. But they have a whole lot of scrutiny and regulatory and legal reasons for, again, operating the way they do. We don't necessarily find out about things until it's in the news and until a terminal is being announced or a pipeline is being built. But if you are paying more attention to that and you're looking past the monthly market statistics that the Calgary Real Estate Board and every realtor is reading to you about why things are still flat, and you're using a little bit more of an intelligent lens to see what's happening in the world and beyond our door and our borders and what the world wants of us right now, then I think you're in a good position to know what to do next. And if you want to call me out on that, or tell me I'm wrong, please do. Or if you just want to talk about this and banter a little bit, nothing would make me happier, because I think this is a really fascinating topic and an incredibly impactful time. It's not great, and I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. Certainly, for the people in the Middle East, that's a devastating time, and also close to home. It is a tough time on our wallets and on our families, and this economic reality we're living through right now is difficult. But what's ahead will be unique, province to province and city to city. And Alberta has this pent-up demand, unlike the US, where we are finally about to meet the moment and I think tap into something that our whole country is going to benefit from, that we now finally have an understanding as to why it matters and why it means something and why we need to make a move or several moves. And I think that we're going to see our real estate trickle down and economic trickle down and real estate bump and rise as a result of that. So take that as you will, and let's see what happens. And I will talk to you again soon.